welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Shaitan Atigari. Good morning.
And I'm Rufai Hussaini. It's a pleasure seeing you once again.
It's a pleasure. Now, we're starting with the National Information Technology Development Agency. That's a federal government agency saddled with the responsibility of developing and regulating information technology in Nigeria. The National Information Technology Development Agency is empowered by its Enabling Act to create a framework for the planning, research, development, standardization, application, coordination, monitoring, evaluation, and regulation of information technology practices in Nigeria by developing standards, guidelines, and regulations for that purpose.
Oh, yeah, Shaitan. As the agency marks its National Data Privacy Week, in fact, that started yesterday, and in collaboration with most of their partners, they're talking about, like tax aid, they're talking about the role of data protection in society. So joining us now is OLUFEMI Daniel, the Dex Officer for Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. OLUFEMI Daniel, it's a joy talking to you this morning, but I just want to talk to you about this week in partnership with some of your partners like tax aid, you know, the deployed training and the likes. What has this been like? How has this week been like? And what have been the conversations? You were there yesterday.
Thank you very much, Rufai and Shaitan. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure being here at Arise Network News. Well, it's been a very hectic and engaging week for us at NITDA. We've had a lot of activities, starting from Thursday, 23rd of the month, and with a press release by the Director General. Then we've had a debate competition, a very exciting one, involving students of the junior and senior, segments of the secondary schools. And we've also had, yesterday we had a national event, national workshop, which was, we had the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy in attendance. It's been a very engaging week for us, and we know that the ripple effects of this week would have a lasting impact on Nigeria.
We saw the rush to meet with the deadline set in October 25, 2019, the deadline for companies expected to submit their data protection audit. Now, my question to you is, what has the compliance levels been like since then?
Well, the compliance level, it started very slowly. But in the last 3 months, we've had a heightened, level of awareness, and people are beginning to, they are coming to us to seek for extension to be able to get their acts together. While we do not expect a magic, but we also we're actually trying to, the timelines were actually, couched in such a way that Nigeria would, be able to meet up with the global expectations, and our businesses would not be left in a kind of a palace situation. That was why we set the deadlines as they are. But talking about the level of compliance, there is still so much more room for improvement, and that is why, while we are using the carrot approach, we're also using the stick approach. We've been sending out compliance notices, and we've also been doing a lot of awareness, like the Privacy Week, and earlier in January we're in Lagos for the DPO workshop and all that. So we believe that before the March 15th, the serious companies and organizations would have actually taken actions that is necessary for them to become compliant.
All right, I just want to still dial back to the event yesterday. It was good you talked about having the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, which used to formerly be the DG of NITDA, that's Issa Patami, there. We would like to know, the robust framework still around data compliance, and, some of your partners that are helping you out with this. I did mention tax aid earlier on, creating awareness as regards that. And what are the frameworks you can set in place to make the compliance, more effective, as it were, to be able to permeate more companies, and so that we can get this audit out and running?
Yes, the issue of framework for data protection regulation is always very important, and because it's a new field, particularly for us in Nigeria, it's a fast-evolving one. I'll give you an example. The GDPR was issued, came into effect in May 25th of 2018, but within 1 year, the Europeans have actually issued about 16 guidelines explaining various issues relating to the GDPR. And for us, what we have done, by Nigeria starting with a regulation rather than an act of the National Assembly, giving us a lot of room to be able to have a learning process. And in the course of this, what we've been able to do, we've met, last November, we met with our DPCOs. One of the things we've been able to do, number one, is to actually develop an implementation framework, which is going to actually, give more flesh to some of the provisions of the main regulation, the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. Aside from that, talking about, we're also deploying technology to be able to make the whole process much more effective, and that's where the tax aid also come in. They are also one of our technology partners. We're actually deploying an audit filing framework platform where people can easily file audit reports, and the controllers will see the report that has been filed for them, and also they'll be able to get a feedback from government to say whether they need to do something more or whether they've actually complied, as it were. So I think this is one of the few regulations and laws in Nigeria that we've actually, been very methodical, strategic, and we've been making progress incrementally, and I think it's a good thing for us as Nigerians that we should be proud of.
Okay, so the NDPR also requires companies to submit yearly audits, as this kicks off this year from every year on the 15th of March, and the fine is 2 million naira, or 2% of what the company, the turnover that the company made that year. However, we know that there is a gap in the technology, in the existing technology that is currently available to most companies in Nigeria. Now, is the NDPR doing anything to close that gap and help these companies subsidize the time and cost that will go into putting their yearly data security audits together?
Yes, well, the one thing the perspective of the economy of data protection regulation is you look at what is the cost of non-compliance, or whether from the Nigerian perspective or from the global business perspective. One of the things we should understand is that when the issue of data protection did not just start, it has started way back from case laws in 1928 in America, but the regulations and laws started evolving from 1981, when the Convention 108 came into being. But being that as it is while the regulation had been put in place to let people know what they are supposed to do, to help organizations be able to actually have a very clear pathway towards compliance. It would be, far-reaching, overreaching for us to say that government should, provide necessary, infrastructure aside from the regulatory and, capacity support, which we have been trying to do. For companies who come to us to say, we need you to help us clarify this and that, we have actually had more than 80 engagements within the last 1 year. Every invitation that NITDA has received for clarification, for coming to build capacity, we have been going, and that is what we are expected to do. Now, talking about the issue of helping organizations to actually comply, we are doing a lot to help. That is why, number one, we are clarifying the issues. We're having an implementation framework. We are also put in necessary technologies. But what we need to let organizations know is to have clarity. And that clarity saves a lot of, finances. So when you have clarity, you know that this is the minimum I'm supposed to do to be able to meet up with the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. And by meeting up with the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, you have substantially meeting up with the expectations of the General Data Protection Regulation or even the California Consumer Privacy Act, which are some of the big regulations that are out there currently. So what we are doing is to reduce the bar and still be able to compete internationally. And talking about how we're also helping businesses. Last year, the Director General of NITDA was in the GITEX International Expo in Dubai to also actually have an engagement with the EU Data Protection, one of the organizations in EU, to be able to do. This organization is actually helps people to comply with Article 27 of the GDPR. What the Article 27 of the GDPR expects is that if you are a foreign company that wants to deal with European citizens, you must have a resident agent. And what we are doing is, rather than every Nigerian going and looking for an agent at exorbitant fees, we are trying to build a conversation where it will be easy and cheaper and, a wholesale kind of arrangement that people who want to, Nigerians who want to deal with Europeans can actually have a go-to, a pathway for them to be able to have that. Our goal is that by 2022, 2023, max, will be the only or one of the few African countries that have met the international standards for adequacy in terms of data processing, and we are working assiduously towards that goal.
Privacy is a very important part of data disposition. I mean, you remember the case of San Bernardino, a certain company that makes phones and the American government. You saw the way the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, weighed in on that issue, the technicality of that. Also, when you see the work that Maria Vestager is doing in the EU, that's the EU anti-competition chief, you know that data is big business. But it looks as though that our data here looks not protected to a large extent. I mean, what is NITDA doing to correct that impression? And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, you are not far from the truth, and we at NITDA we've actually been facing the truth, and we are working to actually correct the anomalies. But we need to go back to history. For Nigeria, the journey of Nigeria towards data protection is actually very recent. Until the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation came in, the only interventions we've had sectoral guidelines by the CBN, Nigerian Communications Commission. We had some provisions in the Health Insurance, Act and other kinds of things. There are pockets of interventions, but the first serious regulation that has actually been issued is the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. Now, it is almost impractical to expect that in 1 year, because the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation was issued 25th of January 2019, in 1 year that everybody would have been compliant. But one of the things that it's also good to look at the corpus outflow, because in the last 1 year, we have seen, number one, the level of awareness has tremendously increased. Number two, we've had over 1,000 companies. I mean, most of the banks have actually reached out to us. They've done their initial data audit report, and some of the financial institutions, which are, these are the dark spots, because when you have a data breach in some of these big financial institutions, it affects everybody. So we see that there is the government industry partnership and willingness to actually close this gap. We are working on that. Talking about the San Bernardino case, there are a couple of issues, there, talking about whether the basis for even processing data, is it for public interest, is it for security interest, and then the jurisdiction and all those kinds of things. We will not shy away from the fact that most of our data is not resident in Nigeria. NITDA is actually working on that, based on international principles, because the only way we can protect our, where you can actually do a protectionist regime is where you are spending public funds. So under the WTO GATT principles. So what that is just saying is that...
Femi, we'll quickly come back to you. We'll go for a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk some more as regards this. We'll be right back. All right, still joining us and talking to us on the Rise Morning Show is OLUFEMI Daniel, Desk Officer for Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. I mean, we're talking about a gamut of issues. Shaito will bring some perspective into this conversation, but I also want to go one step further. I mean, talking about NITDA and your role in data protection. You said something. You said the reason why this is happening is that most of our data are not residents here. I know for a fact, Dr. Issa Patami, when he was on NITDA, there was a project, in consonance with Microsoft and the likes, about cloud residency in Nigeria. I don't know if NITDA is still on that project. The residency of data and holistic hosting of data in Nigeria. The cloud residency conversation. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yes, thank you very much, Rufai. That project is ongoing, and we are making a lot of progress on that. One of the like I've always said, that NITDA in the last few years we've had, a very the leadership has actually been visionary and has sought to do things in such a way that will be beneficial to both Nigerian businesses and the foreign partners who we cannot do without. So in the balance that we've actually done with that is that in the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've had more tier 3 data hosting companies within Nigeria, both in some of the major cities and Abuja, Lagos, and some other places. And that has also given us an opportunity to be able to engage fruitfully with the international, some of the big data holding organizations to say, okay, how can you bring some of your equipment to our infrastructure, the infrastructure that is available to us in Nigeria, and those conversations are ongoing. Our Office of National Content, which is being driven by a very competent person, they are working on it on a daily basis, and we are actually seeing more, reversal of our foreign data. I can't mention some of them, but some of the essential data are already being repatriated to Nigeria because the infrastructure is being provided, encouragement is being given, and it's also obvious that government is serious in this in this regard.
We know that data protection is very essential to the growth of the online business infrastructure, especially in a country like Nigeria. And we're seeing countries like Kenya who recently signed this same deal, knowing that Amazon was coming into their country. Now, my question to you is, how do you plan on staying active in the developing space? So I'm talking about constant upgrades to your platform. Being ahead of the curve, we know that this is the 4th industrial revolution meeting us in 2020. How do you plan to stay active in this developing space?
Yes, the Kenyan Act was it's one of the good things that happened to Africa in 2019, and it's also interesting to also point out that we've actually been having a lot of African, not less than 2 countries in Africa actually understudying the Nigerian model for implementation of the data protection regime. It's one thing to issue an act of the parliament, which, it's something that has been pushed, and we are happy, NITDA is happy and willing to support such efforts. But one of the things that we've actually also seen is that because of the fast evolving nature of data protection, you are better off to have flexibility in your regulatory infrastructure, your regulatory architecture. That would help you to be able to quickly make the necessary regulations, guidelines, and clarifications that would help your industry to be catching up. So talking about staying ahead of the curve, Number one, with the new bill coming through the National Assembly, I believe that the National Assembly, now having seen what NITDA is doing and how we're also trying to work with the other sectoral stakeholders, the National Assembly, we are working together to ensure that while we have an act of the National Assembly, it deals with the principles, I mean the big principles, while we leave the methods and the implementation framework to a very flexible mechanism so that we can actually be, agile in terms of, regulatory, the regulatory strategy. This is very important so that Nigeria would not, will not become asphyxiated while trying to make a law to look good. And at the end of the day, businesses are dying because we are not doing what they need, to have to be able to continue to be competitive in a global economy.
All right, okay.
So real quickly, I was wondering if NITDA would be considering publishing reports on the state of data protection, as well as highlighting emerging threats to the landscape and updating how it operates for these companies.
Yes, it's actually it's one of the things that is actually on board for 2020, because having collected the initial reports, we are seeing the trends, we are seeing where we are, the threats to our infrastructure. And aside from what we are doing with data protection, we also have a project on auditing the IT infrastructure, IT systems, processes of government agencies. This balance needs to be had, and by hopefully before the end of the year, we should actually have a graphical and comprehensive report as to the state of IT use in Nigeria, and that will cut across the issues of privacy, security, cyber issues, and all the other related, issues. I think this is also, the good thing is also that we have a very good relationship with the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, who is more or less coordinating the whole policy for the IT sector. This gives us a very good opportunity to be able to, give Nigerians the right information, not in a piecemeal manner, but in a holistic, for us to have a holistic view of where we are and the opportunities going forward.
Right. I just have two quick questions before we start to wind things down. First, I'd like to ask, is NITDA ready, for a new dispensation of data that will emerge after the full implementation of the AFCta, because Africa is going to be a bigger market. There's going to be influx of trade here and there. So it's going to even be a multiple-fold data regime when AFCta kicks in. And also, I want to also snowball the conversation around, data integration. I'm saying governmental data integration. And I say this very purposefully because you still have many governmental agencies that use things like at Yahoo, .com, at gmail.com. And I'm supposed to think that was the reason why we had Galaxy Backbone in the first place, to be able to bring about this full data integration and be able to map a linear method of collecting and securitization of data.
Yes, talking on your first question about the AFCta, I think where we are, we're in a good position to actually not just lead the digital economic drive of Africa, but we are also in pole position to create massive opportunity for Nigerian businesses. What we are going to benefit from AFCta, I don't think is going to be how much industries. Yes, we can compete industry because we have the energy, we have the land space, we have other things. But more importantly, the things we are going to compete for in AFCta is that we want to be the digital economy hub for Africa. We have the young population to do that. We have a willing government to do that. We have a minister who is actually very much interested in getting this going. And for us, we are very purposeful and strategic about what we are doing. So in AFCta, we are not afraid of Africa being open. We can open the borders. That is not our own concern in the digital space. We want the world to be open because we know that we have the companies, the young people to be able to compete with anybody from any part of the world. That's talking about the AFCta. On the issue, your second question again, please.
I was talking about, the disposition of NITDA as regards, governmental data integration. I mean, we still have a lot of governmental websites or emails that still bear at Gmail, at yahoo.com.uk. And that's why we had Galaxy backward in the first place.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rufai. That question had been a dark spot on many government organizations. For us at NITDA, we actually have the mandate. And the mandate, Galaxy is actually it was actually created out to implement some of the mandates of NITDA, because it is always not good for you to have a regulator also being the implementer. There would be some kinds of mismatch. And we're happy with what Galaxy is doing, but Galaxy more is the operational arm. NITDA ought to and is actually doing the regulatory role. And one of the things we've been doing, we have our domain name desk, and they have actually been doing a lot. In the last 1 year, we've been able to correct over 1,600 issues on people using non-compliant, domain names and all that. So if you look at the statistics, there has been a lot of improvement on that. But of course, there are still some agencies that are still lagging behind. We are going after it, and through the presidency, the minister is also working on it. And I want to believe that this 2020, because of the synergy that is across board, we are going to see, if not zero, there's going to be 100% compliant, particularly in the issues of, using .gov.ng, which is our governmental domain. And also talking about the data integration, the presidency actually inaugurated 2 committees on the issue of data integration, the technical committee and then the regulatory committee. And they have actually made a lot of progress. We are working with NIMC, working with the immigration agency, immigration service, and some other major data holding organizations of government to actually integrate. And one of the things we are doing is that there is number one, we need to even have principles of data interoperability. So the way you collect and store data we need to actually have regulations on that. NITDA has actually issued the interoperability framework so that every government's data is stored in a particular kind of language, in a particular set of rules, so that interoperability and integration will be easier. And also the issue of NIMC also being aggressive with the issuance of NIN is also going to help us a lot, because that is also part of the integration process. So it's a journey. We are not at the destination, but I can assure you, and not just assurance, they are verifiable information that we can see that we are.
Femi, we would like to say a big thank you to you, because time is not our friend. Thank you so much for coming, Femi, from NITDA.